Imagine getting a second paycheck every single month, one you never have to clock in for, one that shows up whether you are at work, asleep, or sitting on a beach in the off-season. That is what dividend investing in Canada really is. It is a secondary paycheck, signed and mailed to you by the biggest monopolies in the entire country. But here's the trap. In 2026, most Canadians are chasing one single number and yield. And that one number is quietly walking them straight off a cliff. They see a fat percentage, they buy it, and they wonder why their money keeps shrinking. So let me show you how to build a portfolio that does the opposite. One that pays you, raises your pay, and never asks for a thing in return. Let's get into it. First, you need to understand why Canada is secretly the best dividend country on the entire planet, and almost nobody talks about this. Canada is an oligopoly. A small handful of enormous companies control entire industries. The banks, the telecoms, and the railways. And the government has spent over a century protecting those castles. We call it the moat. Think about it. When was the last time a brand new bank showed up and stole your account? When did a scrappy startup railway lay its own tracks across the Rockies? It does not happen. The barriers are too high, the regulations are too thick, and the incumbents are too powerful. That is bad news for competition. But for you, the shareholder, it is a money printing machine. Look at the big five banks: Royal, TD, Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, and CIBC. One of these institutions has paid an uninterrupted dividend for nearly 150 years. Think about everything that happened in that stretch. World wars, the Great Depression, market crashes, pandemics, and through all of it, the check never stopped. When you own a piece of the Canadian moat, you are not gambling on a hot idea. You are collecting a toll on the infrastructure that the entire country is forced to use. Every mortgage, every cell phone bill, every barrel of oil shipped east. A tiny sliver of that lands in your account. That is the foundation. Now let's talk about the mistake that... And here's the secret the pros live by. Stop obsessing over the current yield. Start obsessing over the dividend growth. A boring company that pays you 3% today, but raises that payment by 6 or 7% every year, will quietly bury the flashy 11% stock within a decade. You want the raise, not just the wage. Now we get to the part that turns a good portfolio into a bulletproof one. This is the pivot. This is where the CRA either becomes your silent partner or your biggest expense. Here is something most Canadians have no idea about. Eligible Canadian dividends are tax preferred, even in a regular, non-registered account. The government uses a system called the gross up and credit. In plain English, they pretend you earned a little more than you did. Then they hand you a dividend tax credit that wipes out a huge chunk of the tax. The result? Canadian dividend income is often taxed far more gently than the salary you sweat for at your job. But that is the consolation prize. The real fortress is the TFSA. Inside your tax-free savings account, every dividend you collect and every dollar your stocks climb is invisible to the CRA forever. No tax on the income, no tax when you withdraw. It is the closest thing to a legal cheat code that exists in this country. And the room is enormous now. For 2026, the annual contribution limit is $7,000. But if you were an adult when the program launched back in 2009 and you have never used it, your total cumulative room has climbed all the way to $109,000. Imagine sheltering $109,000 of dividend-paying assets and never paying a cent of tax on a single check they generate. That is the shield. That is what bulletproof actually means. A bulletproof portfolio is not built on one stock. It is built like a stool. And a stool needs 3 legs to stand. Leg 1 is financials, your big 5 banks and the big insurers. This is your engine, steady, growing, and backed by that unbreakable moat we talked about. Leg 2 is energy and pipelines. These are the companies that move the oil and the natural gas across the continent. They do not bet on the price of oil. They charge a toll on the volume that flows through their pipes, and they hand a generous slice of that toll straight to you. Leg 3 is utilities, the power and the gas that every home in the country needs to keep the lights on. These are the legendary widow and orphan stocks, names like Fortis, so safe and so reliable that they were considered fit for someone who could not afford to lose a single dollar. They are not exciting. They are not supposed to be. They are supposed to pay. Year after year after year. 3 legs: financials, energy, and utilities. Knock 1 leg. The stool still stands. Now, a quick reality check for this year, because the interest rate environment changes the game. When central bank rates are high, The boring, safe sectors actually suffer the most. Utilities and REITs, real estate trusts, are what we call interest sensitive. Why? Because when a safe government bond pays you 5.5% for doing nothing, investors abandon the utility stock that pays 4% and the price sags. But here is the opportunity hiding inside that fear. As the rate cutting cycle of 2026 plays out and those rates start drifting down, that pressure reverses. The money that fled comes flooding back into utilities and pipelines, lifting their prices while you were quietly collecting a fat, safe dividend the entire time you waited. Smart investors do not fear the interest-sensitive sectors. They buy them while everyone else is scared. Now you flip a switch, and every check automatically buys more shares. Those new shares pay their own dividends, which buy more shares, which pay more dividends. The snowball starts rolling, and it only gets bigger. Let's run the numbers. Say you start with just $2,000, and every month you add $500 and you reinvest every single dividend. In the early years, it feels slow, almost boring. But give it about 10 years, and the income coming off that portfolio quietly starts covering your grocery bill. Call it $300 a month, landing whether you lift a finger or not. Keep going. Around the 20-year mark, that monthly dividend income has swelled to roughly $1,000. Your portfolio is now paying your car note. The machine bought you a car. And if you simply refuse to stop, by year 30, that snowball is throwing off something like $2,500 every single month. That is no longer grocery money. That is your rent. Your portfolio is now paying for the roof over your head forever. And the principal is still sitting there, fully intact, still growing. Groceries, then the car, then the rent. That is the freedom fund. That is the snowball. So here is the lesson. Here is what they never teach you. Wealth in this country was never about picking the next hot tech stock or guessing the next big thing. The people who quietly got rich did something far more boring and far more powerful. They bought the infrastructure of the nation, the banks everyone borrows from, the pipelines everything flows through, the power lines that keep the lights on. And then they did the hardest thing of all. They waited and they reinvested and they let the snowball roll. That is the Canadian compounder. You do not have to be a genius. You do not have to time the market. You just have to own the toll booths, shelter them inside your TFSA, and let time do the rest. Build the moat, avoid the trap, use the shield, and let it snowball. If you learn something